Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Today's guest is Dr. Sara Pugh, and I'm so excited to be able to chat with her about light, water, grounding, nature, and more. This is going to be a rich and varied discussion. Dr. Sara studied biochemistry, then bioinformatics, followed by a Ph.D. in molecular mechanisms, focusing on protein folding, and later went on to research heart muscle cells, cholesterol, and statins, which is so interesting for so many people these days. Dr. Sara has had her work published in various peer-reviewed journals. As well as having the science background and being a dedicated researcher, Dr. Sara has also studied nutrition, focusing on the ketogenic way of eating. She's also a trained hypnotist, a Pilates teacher, and trained in functional neurology. And she integrates neurological therapy into her work with clients to improve their metabolic, physical, and mental health. If you're interested in health, longevity, how nature and natural light can heal the body, and how the quantum realm overlaps with spirituality and consciousness, then you're going to enjoy this interview. And I would urge you to follow Dr. Sara on social media, where her name, by the way, is Busy Superhuman, and read her work because it is fascinating. Dr. Sara, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today. I think it's so rare to have somebody like you who has such a broad depth of knowledge. And when I see how you can look at the bigger picture, when it does make me wonder if modern medicine would be better not having such a narrow view on health issues. And perhaps we can touch on that a little bit later on. Anyway, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Deborah, for having me on.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So, can we begin by talking about light? Because I feel like whether people watching this are new to this whole area or like me have been interested in it for a year or so, I feel everybody can relate to how much better they feel when the sun is out, even though they might not know why they feel better, and how they feel different at the start of the day in the morning to the end of the day at night when it's bedtime. So let's start there. And can you explain why that morning light matters to the human body? What's so special about morning light? And when I say morning light, there's dawn, and then there's a couple of hours after dawn. So what's so special about that light at those times of the day?
Okay, so if we start with light, there's about 10 to the 36, that's like millions and trillions of different possible different possible frequencies in light. So it's like having a piano with 10 to the 36 or to the power of 36 keys. So the amount of information and energy in light is absolutely enormous. And also, as human beings, we evolved under sunlight, and that's the correct kind of electromagnetic information, along with other things we'll get into, like the Earth's magnetic field and Schumann resonance, that our biology is tuned to sunlight. And you're asking about the morning light. So the thing that's really important is we have something called a circadian rhythm or body clocks. And first of all, just from a simplistic term, we need to have clocks so that our bodies know whether to expect food, to detox, or to sleep. And each cell in the body has a clock in front of it. Each gene has a clock in front of it, and each organ has a clock, because the liver and the gut do something completely different at night versus in the daytime. But the other really important thing about having a body clock is biology is based on prediction, and we always need to know what's going to happen. So we have to have a clock so that we don't get surprised by it suddenly getting dark and getting trapped outside. We like to predict when food might be coming. And also biology can be quite slow, that we need to make all of the hormones and neurotransmitters that we need at different times of the day, whether it's something like dopamine or cortisol or testosterone, because all of these have their own special sort of timing and rhythm. And if we sort of imagine the body sort of like an airport, that everything has to happen on time at the right time, otherwise it would be a disaster. That's why having a good body clock or circadian rhythm is so important for health, because most people have experienced jet lag. and is pretty horrible, and their bodily systems are all over the place, that they can't sleep, or they have anxiety or mood issues or brain fog. So having a bad circadian rhythm is actually the same as living with jet lag all the time. And there's numerous studies for over 40 years, with just an example, people like Dr. Martin Moreed, who's been studying circadian rhythms for a very long time. It's actually a health risk to have a bad circadian rhythm. So it's a risk for diabetes, cancer, and other metabolic issues. So managing your light environment is how you can entrain your circadian rhythm, because our master clock is in the eye, or just behind the eye, is called the SCN, or the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So that's the main clock, but also our skin has clocks in it as well. So getting sunlight on our eyes and our skin is really important for the body to be able to tell the time. We probably may not go into this later about food being information, because
Mm.
again, that's made from light fundamentally, because all food systems are based on photosynthesis ultimately. So we can start with the morning light. So first of all, we have something called daybreak, which is about 45 minutes before sunrise. And that's when there's quite a lot of blue light around, even though it still looks dark. And it's sort of a time, if people do get up early, that's a time there is information about what time of day it is. But the important time for people who aren't going to be out at daybreak would be sunrise. So you can just look in the weather app and it'll tell you what time sunrise is in your location, because it's obviously going to be different whether you live in the US or the UK or Australia. And at sunrise, there's a particular blend of blue and red light that gives us a signal. And like I said earlier, the amount of information in that signal is enormous. And we then receive this signal. So it would be photons of light, which strike the eyes and hopefully the skin as well. So it gives our body the signal that it's sunrise, and then it can start to get all of these biological processes ready for the rest of the day. Because, like I said, making hormones and neurotransmitters, it doesn't happen instantaneously, and there are bodily processes that need to get going. And also throughout the day, our clocks drift, so they go off time every day. So every morning we need to reset them again, which is why seeing the sunrise is so important. It's better if you're outside to see the sunrise, because you don't want glass in the way, like contact lenses or glasses or a closed window, because you want the information to you want to receive all of it, because glass blocks UV light and near infrared. So there's not UV light out at sunrise, but that's the next important stage. So about an hour after sunrise, there's a phase in the morning called the UVA rise, and that's when the ultraviolet A light comes out. And this provides different signals and different information. So it switches off some of the things which got switched on at sunrise, but it's also a really important time for making serotonin, dopamine, thyroid hormones, and other neurotransmitters. And also making serotonin in the morning is really important for later when you want to go to bed, because that's is going to get turned into melatonin for sleeping. So really to set yourself up for a good night's sleep, it actually starts in the morning. So before we move into other parts of the day, if you wake up and look at your phone straight away, the information, the blue light from the screen is going to tell your brain it's 12 o'clock noon in the middle of June. So it's completely
Mm.
confusing to your body. So this can be pretty stressful for the system, because it's got totally confused now of what time it is on a biological level. And there are obviously lots of other stressful things that happen in the morning as well. So doing that is going to make things worse.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Then
And so so if you do look at your phone first thing, would that raise cortisol? So would your cortisol level raise then
yeah,
if you're looking at at the wrong light?
because first of all, artificial blue light raises cortisol and blood sugar anyway, which that's why sitting in blue light and around screens and inside all day is going to raise your cortisol and blood sugar. So it kind of relates to metabolic problems and obesity and diabetes, but also stress. So there's that factor, but it's also the fact that you've completely confused your body, because it was expecting to see red and blue and violet light and a sunrise, and you've showed it just a very narrow wavelength of blue light from a screen. So it's something, it's stressful, not just on a sort of information level, it's also stressful biochemically. And also with our bodies, when we create confusion in our body, it's a biophysical term, we would say chaos, and it's just another word for inflammation. So again, the environment we live in is not the best environment as it could be. So adding more problems and chaos and confusion
Mm,
and inflammation and
mm,
blood sugar dysregulation by getting up and looking straight at your phone for half an hour is adding to that problem. And it's
mm.
something that everybody can learn not to do.
Yes, precisely, yes. So if we do manage to get out for sunrise, how long do we have to stay out for? Is there a particular time, length of time that is better?
I would say that the sicker or worse somebody is, the longer they need to be out. So for those kind of people, it would, if they are able to, because of, maybe they're self-employed or maybe they're off work at the moment, as long as possible. So it would be all the way from sunrise through the UVA rise, so as long as possible. But for everybody else, it's just as much as possible. And like I said, the minimum would be something like 2 to 3 minutes. But it's all about, well, what are you going to do instead, and how important is your health to you? And a lot of people I know would go for a little walk, or they'll take the newspaper outside to read something paper instead, or
Right.
they'll get their breakfast ready with the window open and then have their breakfast outside. So yeah, it's basically as nowadays with what goes on in the world, it's about how much effort you're willing to put in. So if you want to
Mm.
just put in 2 minutes of sunrise, you won't get the same benefits as putting in half an hour. So it's all back to how much do you want it, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes, it
Um,
does. Yes, thank you.
whereas for somebody completely brand new to this, even just not looking at their phone and opening the window in the bathroom and seeing the sunrise, that's massively better than just looking at your phone for half an hour. So it's all about where somebody is at the moment, because obviously people have different schedules in the morning, and some people have early
Mm,
starts and people
mm,
have
mm,
children. But sometimes
mm,
if something's important to us, we have to prioritize doing it, but also understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, because that's the thing a lot of people don't understand about circadian rhythms and sunrises, and they don't realize that if you don't have a good grounding in your circadian rhythm, you'll have a mitochondria that are confused. It confuses your gut microbiome, and we can blame all sorts of other things on that.
mm,
Whereas, if
mm.
you want to get better or stay healthy, or protect yourself from sort of mental health issues or metabolic issues, you have to sort of put time in to do things. And for sure, people always ask me what's the minimum, and I always give them the same answer.
Yeah, sure. So you did touch before there, you mentioned breakfast, and we will get into nutrition a little bit later on, but just whilst you were talking about that, so what about if people are fasting? So is that going to be an issue? So they get up in the morning, they see that morning light, is the body going to expect food at that point, or is it okay to just carry on doing that morning fast?
um, with them timers in the body. So light's the primary zeitgeber or timekeeper, but then food and cold are the second two. So if people miss breakfast, they're going to dysregulate leptin signaling, which is our ultimate sort of appetite and energy accountant in the body, which is light dependent, but it also has a food component. So if people miss breakfast, they're just priming themselves for sort of leptin problems, especially if they sit in blue light all day and do other things wrong. And also, it's the cortisol can rise more, because cortisol actually raises blood sugar. So if you don't put food in, your body
Mm,
will just find its own way. So with fasting, I think we can go into it later, better to miss lunch or dinner.
right.
And also another thing I'm very big on is testing, not just blood tests, but also things like HTMA tests, which is hair tissue mineral analysis, which actually tells you more about your hormone statuses and systems in the body. So
Mm,
people who are fasting, they need to check their sex hormones and their leptin, because if you've got leptin resistance and very bad sex hormones, the last thing you want to do is stress your body even more by missing breakfast, and it tends to affect women more than men.
mm.
And I
Mm.
think fasting's brilliant. I just think it's, just do it, miss a different meal, just because getting the timekeeping in the morning is so important. And ideally, you want all three of those timekeepers, the Zeitgebers, the light. It's always colder in the morning, hence going outside, and then the food. And you want to eat within about say an hour of sunrise, because
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Gosh. Okay. Right. Brilliant. And the HTMA test you mentioned, can we get that in the UK? Is that something that we can order here?
Oh, yes, yes. They're not very expensive. They're about £89. They're quite hard
Right.
to interpret because people think it's just telling them how many minerals are in the body and how much heavy metals they've got, but it's a lot more than that. But also there are places in the UK where you can get, I use Medichecks, but there are other companies you can test leptin, you can test sex hormones, you can test your metabolic health, you can get cortisol
Right.
saliva tests. So,
Mm,
I'm all for nowadays, just don't guess,
mm,
just test, because there are so many women who'll then excessively fast and then do CrossFit in the morning and drink coffee and then
yeah.
come to me with no sex hormones. And it's like, well, if you'd have tested them before you embarked on this extremely rigid fasting, you would have seen already you didn't have the capacity. And things like a HTMA test and cortisol tests can also pull out sort of the beginnings of adrenal fatigue, because once you've got adrenal fatigue, it's quite a long way back. Whereas I find a lot with
Right.
labs, people turn up with nasty labs way before they get symptoms, and that can be all sorts from raised ferritin to high
Mm,
HbA1cs, which is blood sugar.
mm,
There's all sorts you can pull out. So it's better to test, just to make sure you know where you're at, because we
mm,
do have a level of resilience in the body. It's tolerant, but there comes a point where it can't cope anymore. So I think, again, understanding your biology is also just as important as doing all of these things. Otherwise, how do you even know something's working? How do you know it's not making a particular situation worse?
absolutely. Yes. Yes. Good. Thank you. Thank you. So, what about in the daytime, wearing sunglasses? Is that something that you recommend or that you don't recommend doing?
No, if you wear sunglasses, you're blocking the signals. This is now into ultraviolet B mainly, which is making vitamin D. So you'll block all of the signals in your eyes. So your skin isn't expecting UVB light. So it's going to hamper your vitamin D production. And also, it's blocking all of the other light signals for timekeeping in the day.
Mm,
And it's the same with sunblock. If you wear sunblock, you block UV light. And most people, especially in the UK, are UV deficient, and their sun creams concentrate the blue and the cyan light into the skin. So you're more likely to sort of get basal cell problems. And you're basically shielding yourself from the thing that we evolved with. And all of these signals throughout the day are absolutely crucial. And vitamin
mm,
D we make ourselves is absolutely vital for health. Whereas if we take a supplement, it's just one form of vitamin D out of about 15. And the supplement messes up magnesium and potassium levels, and people are usually deficient in those. And
yeah.
it's going to stop you making your own vitamin D. And we're perfectly capable of making it either on holiday or when we have a sunny day here, if we
Mm,
expose
mm,
ourselves to the sun. And using sunglasses will just confuse the body, because now it thinks it's dark, and it'll also
mm.
hamper your vitamin D production.
Right. Okay. So it's important to get out. Of course, the problem we have in the UK is we don't get an awful lot of sun. I
Mm.
mean, it's sunny maybe for a couple of days, and then it might not be sunny for another week or two, perhaps. So how can we get around that? Can we just, if we spend time outside, is that still going to give us some benefit, even though the sun might not be out?
Yeah, so first of all, to answer that, the first bit is get as much skin out when there is the sun out. So bikinis or just shorts or nothing if you've got privacy.
Mm,
But when
mm,
we go outside, the clouds block the ultraviolet light, but the red light and the blue light and the near infrared still come through. And the near infrared is penetrates very deeply into the body. And this is really important for our water battery, which is what powers us, and for our mitochondria. So, and people pay a lot of money for red light panels, which will
yeah.
have visible red, and then you've got one or two wavelengths out of millions of near infrared, whereas the sun makes near infrared all the time, even at night. and it's there 24/7, and it's about 45% of sunlight anyway. So if you go outside and it's cloudy, it's just the ultraviolet light that you're missing. And again, like I said, that's really important for numerous things, including making melanin, which is a tan.
Mm,
So we to some extent can get a little bit of UV through the clouds, but there's still benefits going out when it's cloudy, because if you're not outside, then you're inside around artificial light and
mm,
non-native
mm,
EMFs and tech, and
mm.
you're not grounded. So there are benefits for certain going out, and there's like
Right.
more to that as well about going outside.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So first thing in the morning, if we can get outside, see that morning light, not use our phones until later on, and just spend some time out of doors, essentially.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. And also, you don't have to see the sun, because there are things like mountains or trees or
Mm,
apartments in the way, because
mm,
the whole sky, the whole atmosphere is going to be illuminated. So these
mm,
photons of
mm,
light are going to be able to get to your skin and your eyes, even if there's a big mountain in the way. Obviously, it's better if you're on a beach or somewhere where you can watch it come up,
mm,
because it is actually
mm,
safe to watch the sunrise because it's very low intensity healing light. So it's not just about resetting the circadian rhythms. This particular blend of red light is really beneficial for healing from
mm,
skin issues, eye issues, pain, all sorts of things. And seeing the sunrise also prepares your body to receive ultraviolet light later. It's part of building something called a solar callus. So your body doesn't just get a big surprise that you just go straight out on a really hot day at noon without preparing it to receive. And again, that's one of many reasons people are frightened of the sun, because they get burnt in it. But maybe they sat in blue
mm.
light all day and never saw the sunrise, and suddenly went abroad to Mallorca and went
Yeah.
straight out in the sun. Of course, they're going to burn.
Yes, of course. Yes, yes, definitely, definitely. And have you noticed a difference with your clients when they've started the habit of getting out for that morning light and say their blood pressure reducing?
Yeah, well, with blood pressure, that's more of an ultraviolet effect, because ultraviolet light makes nitric oxide, and this is a really important signaling molecule in the body for the immune system for pain. It dilates blood vessels. I think those the people who've discovered it have won a Nobel Prize. I can't remember
Mm,
exactly which
mm,
year, but because it dilates the blood vessels, it's the ultimate anti-blood pressure sort of solution. And the sun is one of the best things for bad hearts and blood pressure. So it's more the ultraviolet light on the skin, because you need it to hit the skin. So definitely there's a
right.
reduction in blood pressure, but
Yeah.
also there'll be a reduction in blood pressure as well, because if people are not performing sort of stressful activities like getting up and just looking at the phone, which no matter what we do, look in the phone, we're going to find something that annoys us or upsets us or triggers
Yeah. Or
us.
triggers us,
So
yeah.
and then
Mm,
again, a lot of people have LEDs in the house, or they don't realize, the incandescent bulbs don't emit the artificial blue light. So just by getting out of their environment and outside and away from some of the tech is going to benefit their blood pressure. Because also the tech, with the electric fields that get made, they have people think because they don't penetrate the body, they don't have an effect. But everything's about electric fields, and it basically creates white noise for the mitochondria, so they don't function properly. There are it's not just they don't just make water and ATP, they make all sorts of other signaling molecules, and they're like a microprocessor. And if they're not functioning properly, then you're wide open to about 85% of other diseases. So there's
yeah.
huge benefits to going outside. It doesn't matter what level people understand it to. It's just a
Mm.
way to get back in touch with what we evolved with, which was the magnetic field of the earth, the Schumann resonance, and natural sunlight.
Yes, yes. Okay. So can you just talk for a minute or two then about vitamin D? You did mention it just before, because getting outside and getting the light, it does help us to make vitamin D within our own bodies. Yes?
Yeah, so we make vitamin D out of cholesterol, and you need the high energy photons from the UVB light, because there's a particular form of cholesterol that the light cracks it open, and then it can be made into vitamin D via lots of steps. So there's lots of intermediates and different sorts of vitamin D, and eventually it's going to get turned into active vitamin D, which the body uses. And during this process, it also needs magnesium as well to perform this reaction. So we need to get out in ultraviolet B. So I would say from about 11 till about 2:30, that's the window for making vitamin D at the moment in the UK in
Mm,
August. It's
mm,
different in other countries. So if we don't make it ourselves, first of all, we're taking a synthetic supplement and just
mm.
messing everything up. But secondly, like I said, we cholesterol is the starting material for making vitamin D. So not that cholesterol is dangerous, but we don't want it to sort of build up, because it's just, if it's building up, it's just telling you something. Whereas we want it to perform one of its jobs, which is being broken, well, made into vitamin D. So that's why going out in the UVB is really important, and why making your own vitamin D is key, because there are so many different kinds of vitamin D that we make. And the active form is not the one that we get tested for in an ordinary vitamin D blood test. That's testing storage vitamin D. And the supplement comes in a storage vitamin D form, which doesn't do anything. Your body has to turn that into active vitamin D, and that uses up a lot of precious magnesium. So it just makes sense. If you can make it, don't take it.
Right. Yes, yes, yes. Good. No, brilliant. Thank you. And of course, what we're learning more and more about cholesterol, really, aren't we? And how important cholesterol is. So, just whilst we're talking about cholesterol, what are your views on statins?
Well, that's why I left science, because it was just trying to make me do projects saying they were something helpful. But
Mm,
cholesterol just does so much in the body.
mm,
So it's really important for cell membranes. It's really important for the immune system, for mood. But something that lots of people are interested in are hormones. So I just mentioned that
mm,
we make vitamin D out of cholesterol, but we also make sex hormone. So that's estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, testosterone, out of something called pregnenolone. So that's cholesterol, thyroid, and vitamin A together. That makes pregnenolone. So we need cholesterol to make sex hormones. So if we start fiddling about with cholesterol, then we're going to make sex hormone deficiency worse. And that's kind of rife. There are people in their late 20s and early 30s that ask me, or should I start taking HRT? So that's another really important part. And that's again back to vitamin D.
mm.
The vitamin D and vitamin A should always balance. That's another reason, if you take a lot of vitamin D supplements, you're going to put your retinol, your vitamin A, completely out. And vitamin A and retinol, the central retinol pathway, is something that's one of our sort of governing energy systems. And this gets activated at sunrise and in the morning. So a deficiency of vitamin A is a really big issue. And people can put their vitamin A out by taking D supplements. Also, for the things like rhodopsin and opsins in our eyes,
Mm.
retinol is an important part of them. So most people have heard about carrots and seeing in the dark, although that's beta carotene in a carrot. So vitamin A is also sort of crucial for all of this. And also, there are more than one forms of vitamin A, and they
Mm.
get activated properly with sunlight. So again, you can't just take a supplement, because vitamin A supplements are not safe. They're a very bad idea. That you
Yeah.
have to get it naturally, but you
Yes.
also still need the sunlight to activate the retinol or the vitamin A.
And just whilst we're talking about vitamin A, have you got a view on eating liver, say beef liver? Because I know some people do enjoy eating beef liver. Is that an issue with getting too much vitamin A then?
It depends. Well, I'm very advocative of organ meats,
Hmm.
and you can get vitamin A from grass-fed butter as well, and also unpasteurized or raw dairy is a source of vitamin A as well.
Hmm.
But absolutely, I think liver is massively important, and generally people don't get too much, because look at lots of labs. People do get sometimes slightly too much vitamin A when they start taking those ancestral organ capsules, because
Yeah.
it's so concentrated in
Hmm.
iron, copper, vitamin A in our body. That's not sort
Hmm.
of natural way to take on board vitamin A, although they can be
Hmm.
helpful in the beginning if somebody's very deficient or hates liver. We have to be really careful with the dosages.
Yeah.
Also, it's back to what I said at the beginning. You should always test yourself, not just stuff yourself full of lots of supplements, or just
Hmm.
eat tons of
Hmm.
liver every day. But the
Right.
good thing about actual liver is if our bodies don't want something, it tends to sort of repel us or disgust us, or we just don't fancy it. Whereas with
Ah,
swallowing supplements,
right.
it's all hidden in a capsule, so
Okay.
we've lost our connection with
So,
the
so
information.
we don't get that feedback from our
Yes,
bodies, in other
exactly.
words, to say, look, I've had enough of this. I love beef liver, and I find that after I've eaten it, I just feel incredible. Even the following day, I feel fantastic. But I'm don't know if, I never eat more than 100 grams a week, but I just don't know if that's too much
Oh no, that's
or,
probably not enough because also
oh,
the liver's
right.
got lots of copper in it and it's got vitamin
Mm,
K2, and lots of people are copper deficient as well because for some
right.
reason they think it's toxic. And then lots of people have got iron overload because it's added to
Mm,
so many fortified and processed foods in a sort of chemical form, not the proper form that comes in meat.
yeah.
So it's
Yes.
all back to that's not sort of that much liver, and there are people who eat far more than that. So I would
Right.
say that your body generally just doesn't fancy it. And it's also always better to get tested and then you can
Mm,
assess how much you need
yes.
because our food doesn't contain the nutrients that it used to. And all the databases that people use were made
Mm.
in the 1950s. So we don't actually know how much potassium's in a tomato or how much vitamin K or
Yeah,
vitamin A there is in a lamb's liver. And it would always be better to source grass fed or from a farm shop as
absolutely.
well.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I do wonder if I might be low in something because it just seems so weird that after I've eaten beef liver, I just feel I just feel fantastic. So, so much better than I do on the days when I'm not eating liver. So it just makes me wonder if, and so I think you're right, getting some tests would be a really good idea.
Or the other sort of guideline would be about 25 grams a day. But then everybody has different needs, and
Yeah.
it's like I said, I really like lamb's liver, but there's some days I just don't want it because I've
Mm,
probably had enough. And then there are things like vitamin A in other foods as well, and vitamin
yes.
K2 is another really important supplement as well, not supplement, but
Mm,
nutrient as
mm,
well. And
mm,
also when you get it from animals like liver, it's been programmed by the sun because the animal was outside and it was eating grass. Whereas if you buy
mm,
supplements, the quantum information or the information is lost, the light information, because they were produced in a factory synthetically. So it might look the same molecule, but it's not the same as getting it naturally. Although there are some situations where people might need to supplement, but that's sort of beyond the scope of the podcast.
yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Yes, yes. Okay. No, that's really fascinating. Thank you. And so just whilst we're talking about iron as well, what do you think about giving blood? Do you think giving blood is a good idea?
Oh, yes, it's brilliant. It's really important for women after the menopause and men because they don't have periods. And also the marker for um, iron overload would be ferritin because doctors are not very good at reading iron labs, and you need to look at copper and iron labs together. So you need to read the whole thing, the iron, the
Mm,
hemoglobin, the hematocrit, the other components of blood. And then things like ferritin will tell you that shouldn't be in the bloodstream because that's a storage form. So if people have got high ferritin, that's a sign that there's iron in the tissues and it's unbound iron, and it's just going to get in the way of all sorts of things. Bound iron in the mitochondria or in an enzyme, that's where it
mm,
belongs. And copper helps to
mm,
mobilize iron because it should be on the move all the time. If it's sitting around in
right.
pieces, because it's
Yeah.
very
And
oxidative.
so where are we getting that? You're saying it should be moved around all the time, but that ferritin, is that coming from like old red blood cells or something?
Oh no,
Is this
it's just a an iron. It's a form of it's actually a protein, and it's informing you that there's iron spilling out of tissue into the bloodstream. So
oh
it
right.
shouldn't be there. That
Okay.
the transferritin is what carries iron around the body. And then we've obviously got hemoglobin, which is a bound
Mm,
iron. So the iron is bound in a ring. So the ferritin is just a marker of saying that there's so much in the tissue, it's coming out in the blood. So because it's a storage form of iron, not
mm.
a mobile form.
Right. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. So, can we just, because I still want to talk a little bit about light. So, can we just touch on, because we were talking about light and our hormones. So, what about thyroid? Because Do people's thyroid levels fluctuate during the year, depending on whether it's light or, during the winter time, it might be different from during the summertime. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, definitely. So the thyroid hormone is going to fluctuate in the summer versus the winter because the summer is more of a time of abundance. So it tends to be higher around summer and autumn because all the fruit and everything's out. So that's
Mm,
why eating seasonally and locally is important because if you deny yourself the seasonal and local produce, your body was expecting it. But also the thyroid is governed by the central retinol pathway, which I was talking about before. So it's dependent on sunrise signals and ultraviolet light. But it's also dependent on leptin because leptin controls thyroid and insulin. So as I was saying before, leptin is a hormone that is the energy accountant or governor in the body. So people can get low thyroid if they just don't eat enough because the leptin will sense an energy deficit, whereas only about sort of 30% of our food actually, sorry, of our energy comes from food anyway. We're supposed to get the other 60% from the environment, which would be light, grounding, and then there's something called plasma. I won't go into that. So
mm,
if people are
mm,
not going outside enough, not grounding enough, their body is going to sense low energy because they can't charge their water batteries up properly. They're not acting like a solar panel anymore. So that would give a leptin problem, which would then give people a thyroid problem because the body's detecting low energy. I must store everything. I must slow it all down. So
mm,
leptin does have a food component, but there's also an extremely strong dominant light and grounding and water and energy on a sort of level people don't think about, as in electrons and photons and things like that. So that's sort of a quick whirlwind tour of thyroid. But there's
yeah.
also other factors because excessive calcium can block thyroid uptake. So people might have enough hormone, but it can't get into the cell. So that's another sort of angle. So thyroid is quite complicated, but it's definitely something
Mm,
like
mm,
anemia that people are just too quick to get a diagnosis of low thyroid and want to take medication straight
mm,
away without
mm.
actually fixing the root cause.
Right, right. And I think so therefore then thyroid tests would differ at different. So you might go for a thyroid test and think that you're really low on thyroid, but in actual fact it's because you are maybe not getting outside enough, you're not getting enough light. And then so if you were to do that, that might settle the whole thing down. And so how would you go on then during the winter time? So is there a way of balancing the thyroid hormone out during the winter when there's less light? Is there something else
Yeah.
that we have to do?
Oh, yes, you have to do cold thermogenesis because when we expose ourselves to cold, we make ultraviolet light inside us. So that's why doing cold thermogenesis in the UK is vital because if there's no sun out there, you can make ultraviolet inside your body. So you can make neuromelanin, you can make ultraviolet light through the cold. Um, so yes, so with the thyroid, you have to sort of look at other things, and that's why I was saying about skipping breakfast. That's going to affect leptin and energy status of the body. So that's going to also make thyroid issues more likely. Whereas never seeing any ultraviolet light in the morning, that
Mm,
needs the signal to start making the thyroid hormone out of iodine and tyrosine isn't sufficient.
right.
And then if people are not grounding enough, that draws in electrons from the earth, so that's more energy. If we're not getting any kind of light, because like I said before, the red light that's there all the time, that's the thing which charges our water battery, our EZ water or fourth phase of
Mm,
water.
mm,
So even if it's cloudy, it's still helping your energy status in the body. And then excessive use of tech is going to steal your water battery because the water goes back to being bulk water. And then if you're in blue light all the time, artificial light, that actually blocks something called complex 4 in the mitochondria, the one that makes water. So it's
right.
kind of quite simple to sort of say to people if they are just inside all the time, away from natural sources of energy outside, they're going to become energy deficient on a sort of quantum biology level. And everything is physics, really,
Mm,
whereas people just think everything's about food.
right, right, okay.
Food does
Mm,
matter because
yes.
if people are eating lots of sugar, that the fructose in that blinds the leptin receptor, and if people are snacking all the time, that's going to affect leptin signaling. If people are always missing breakfast and then eating too close to bed, that's going to
Yeah.
mess up leptin as well. So it's about everything. But then there are
Yeah.
always people that do the food bit right, and then they still have all these problems
Mm,
because the
mm.
food component is not as important as the light and the water, the
Yes.
magnetism component.
Yes, yes. So I think that's the thing. I think we are beginning to understand now, or I'm beginning to understand now, maybe, how important light and grounding is. So it's not just about the food, is it? It's about other things as well. So it sounds like what you're saying is during the winter time, maybe get outside into the light without a coat on, and maybe get a little bit of cold like that. Um,
Yeah, or you can
so that's going to help.
yeah, you can open windows because that'll let the light in. And for some people that like to get up late, they find it's easier to see the sunrise sort of in autumn and winter because it comes up later in the UK.
Yeah.
But then you can make cold plunges. My friend's got a cold plunge in his garden that he uses all year round, and you can run a cold bath and put ice in it and make your own ice bath. So there's
Yes.
lots of ways. And just like you said, just for beginners, just wearing less clothes and turning the heating down and opening the window, because the other important part of cold thermogenesis is it makes brown fat, and that's metabolically
Ah,
active fat. So it's a
yeah.
natural protection against diabetes and leptin resistance and
Mm,
insulin resistance. So sitting at the same temperature all day in a heated house is not
mm,
natural at all, because again, temperature is a signal for the body, and it's a timekeeper. So embracing the cold, and not believing the complete nonsense. So you'll catch a cold if you get
yeah.
cold.
Yeah.
And also it's anti-aging as well. You can do cold face plunges. It makes the way the mitochondria work. It's, in simple terms, squashes the electron transport chain closer together. So the electron flow in the mitochondria is better. So everything's more efficient, and you make less free radicals. Which is free radicals aren't bad. They're only bad if there's too many. So there's lots of
Mm,
sort of anti-aging effects to cold thermogenesis, and also it's anti-inflammatory. It releases dopamine and other neurochemicals for mood. So it's really important for mental health in the winter because, sure, there's less sun, but then you can make your own UV light. You can make your own dopamine extra and noradrenaline by doing cold plunges. It's really good for insulin resistance and leptin resistance as well. So it's a really important part of living in a climate that's colder with less sun. You have to embrace the
yeah.
cold.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. And so for people who haven't got a cold plunge, another option might be having a shower in the morning and then gradually turning the thermostat down so that it just goes colder and colder, and just staying under that really cold water for what, 30 seconds or a
Um,
minute?
Probably like with a cold shower, it's not real cold thermogenesis because the heat transfer between air and water is not the same. So it's
Right.
better than
So you
nothing.
need to be in it, in other words,
Yes, you
rather
need to
than getting
immerse
it on
yourself in
you.
it. Yes,
Right.
but it's
Okay.
a brilliant start. And also, I'd probably say 2 to 3 minutes is the minimum. But you won't get all the
Right.
benefits, but you'll get some of them.
Some of
Um,
them.
and it's all
Right.
back to, it depends how much people want it. If they
Oh,
want better, sort of less inflammation, better neurotransmitters. Obviously, cold thermogenesis is going to boost your metabolism. So it's like having a workout without exercising. So if they want all the benefits, then they're going to have to maximize it by either using a bath with ice in it or getting a cold plunge tub. And then if
yeah.
people just want to do a little bit, then yeah, sure, they'll get results, but they're not going to get the same results as if they
Right.
sort of went. I mean, it's too cold to swim outside in the UK in the winter, but you
Mm,
can in a wetsuit, but you can all the way up to the end of October. So I
mm,
think it's all back to, it depends how much people want something and how much
yeah.
effort they're going to put in. So it's like proportional to the amount of effort you put in is proportional to what's going to come out. And then, of course, there are people who love it so much they'll go to excess, like
Mm,
everything. So no matter what, there's always like the U curve that if you do far too
mm.
much, then it's just
Oh,
going to be counterproductive as well. But
yes.
people build up to it because if
Mm,
somebody's sat in a warm living room or house all their life, they're
mm,
not going to be
mm.
cold adapted. So they would
No.
just start with wearing less clothes, turning down the heating, doing a cold shower, and then they would move into ice baths and cold plunges and swimming outside. So it's kind of like
Mm.
anything. It's like exercise. People don't just go and do CrossFit all of a sudden if they've not exercised for 10 years.
Exactly. They've got to build up to it. And so do you think that being in the cold is something that our ancestors were just used to? That it just happened so naturally for them that they weren't aware maybe of things being that cold? Because I think in the modern world, when we've got heating and whatever else it might be, just the difference between like living normally and then having a cold shower seems huge. But is this something that our ancestors were just totally used to?
Oh, yeah, they would have been cold adapted because, in terms of evolution, people will have migrated away from the equator gradually, and over time, their mitochondria changed to be able to do something called uncoupling. So that's when they can use energy to produce just heat, whereas people with a coupled haplotype, they're not so good at that. So gradually over time, the mitochondria evolved to be able to produce a lot more heat. Otherwise, people would have just frozen to death.
Mm, mm,
So it happened gradually, and then it's all about people didn't know any different, so they would have had fires and things like that.
mm,
And you don't know what you don't know. And
mm,
the mitochondria of people who migrated north, they're all going to be an uncoupled haplotype. Again, very good at sort of making heat. Um, it's I won't go into the details, but it's a trait that people who are more northern ancestry have. So
mm,
people who don't tap into this ability to uncouple and embrace the cold, it can lead to sort of problems like weight gain and stuff like that because these people's biology is expecting the cold and it's adapted for it. They've just overheated their house and warmed up, themselves too much, so they're not tapping into this natural uncoupling ability that we have. So, yes, our ancestors, some people probably would have frozen to death, but it would have been a gradual process of people slowly migrating and the
mm.
mitochondria being able to uncouple. And then, like a lot of things, we don't like being uncomfortable, which is actually
No,
good for us at sometimes. So that's a lot of modern society. It
yes.
creates problems because people just want to be comfortable all the time, whereas
Mm.
humans are sort of not really evolved for that. We are evolved to be uncomfortable because small stresses are really good for us.
Yes, yes, yeah, exactly. No, that's really fascinating. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, can we just move on now and can we talk about maybe grounding? So, what grounding is and why it's important to the human body?
Okay, so when we wear shoes that are an insulator, we can't draw in electrons or electric current from the earth. So we're not in contact with it. So when we take our shoes off or wear leather-soled shoes or shoes with a copper rivet in it or put our hands on the ground or on a tree or on some concrete or swim in the sea, we're now connected back to the earth. And the electric current or the electrons from the earth comes from lightning striking it all the time. So it's negatively charged. So first of all, it's collecting energy, which is electrons, and that's what light needs to excite in the body. And electrons we can just think of it as like money, and we get electrons from food as well, but then the grounding electrons are different. So first of all, it's a way to get more energy into the body naturally, and it's also connecting us with Earth's magnetic field. And you have to do it outside really, so you've got to
Mm,
go out in the light. And there's also the Schumann resonance, which is a really important sort of frequency, which is like the heartbeat of the earth, that in simple terms is important for sort of relaxation, contentedness, our mood. So going
mm,
out grounding ticks like numerous boxes. And there are also studies on grounding to show improved blood flow, less inflammation, better mood. So it's just
mm,
something that over time through civilization, we've just become insulated or isolated from our environment.
yeah.
And hands and feet are a little bit sweaty naturally, just because when something's a bit wetter, it can conduct electricity better.
And so then sort of if we're grounding in the UK where it's wet a lot of the time, if I go and stand on the grass that might have the morning dew on it, for instance, am I getting a greater benefit from that than I am
Yes.
from standing on dry grass?
Yes, yes. So it's better if it's wet. And also, one of the bonuses of northern latitudes like the UK, it's more magnetic up here than it is at the equator. and there's sort of more electric currents from the Birkeland current. So just because we don't have sun as nice as good as there would be at the equator, we've
Mm,
Mother Nature's
mm,
given us other tools that we can use for health. Because if it was so bad in the UK with the light, then nobody'd live here. So it's about
no.
tapping into other resources which aren't available in other places. Because yes, there's obviously much better sunlight at the equator, but then there's less magnetism, whereas we've got more up here. So it's about understanding your location and capitalizing on the benefits that your location's offering you. Or if you really can't stand it, then move somewhere that's sunnier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Good. Thank you. And I mean, I must admit, I've over the last few months, I've tried if there's a nice day and I'm doing some gardening, I started gardening barefoot. So, and I'm sure that I do feel better, because of that. Because then I'm touching the plants as well as walking on the grass. So I feel like I'm getting a double benefit out of that. And certainly in the mornings now when I'm getting outside and I'm going out to have a look at that morning light. It's not the dawn light, it's the morning light. And I'll take my shoes off, stand on the grass for a few minutes. And, this what I was doing this morning was it's like touching the mint plants and just the beautiful, scent of the mints and then of the mint, sorry, and then looking up into the sky. And maybe it takes me like 5 minutes, I feel, for my eyes to feel I'm out of that sleepiness. But I definitely feel a huge difference when I go back inside. And I don't know if it's just the light or a combination of the light and standing on the grass or touching the plants or whatever it is, but I feel a lot more energized. And there's definitely a difference, but it does take me about 5 or 6 minutes, I would say, of just feeling that I've got that sleepiness out of my head, maybe, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense because that's why I go for a walk in the morning always, because like I was saying, it's not going to be instant. And if people think just looking at the sunrise for 30
Mm.
seconds is going to benefit, but
Yeah.
also there's more to what you've said because you're grounded, you're receiving a sense, but there's also this sense of joy of this is my garden and I'm connected to
Mm.
nature and I feel part of something, and it moves you out of the fear mindset, which is very destructive. It's a biofield we can actually measure
Oh.
into the love
Mm.
mindset. So that's a really good start to the day as well.
Yeah.
And yes, it does take a little bit of time. That's why I said the more the better. And some
Mm.
people wake up not sleepy, but really stressed. And if they crash
Mm.
about inside and look at their phone and get in a bigger stress, it's going to get worse. Whereas I've always found if I wake up in one of those moods, which is rare, I'll think, oh no, I've got all this stuff to do. And if I go for a walk, all of a sudden I just feel normal again. Whereas the temptation is to just stay inside and, oh no, I'm
And
having
start
a
getting
bad day.
on with things, and
Yes, yeah.
yes,
Oh no, my
exactly.
period's coming, or oh no,
Yeah.
whereas guaranteed every single time, as soon as I've gone out for my walk and come back, I always feel better. So,
Yes.
and it's also just a natural thing to do. So even if people think it's woo-woo, what's the alternative to sit around a load of artificial light and negative things on Twitter?
Definitely.
So you just have to learn to
Definitely.
do the opposite. And there's a lot to be said
Mm.
about sort of what you're doing because you obviously really love your garden, so that's like joy for you as well, and that's a really important component. It's not just about light and food and grounding, it's about emotions and biofields to get the whole thing, and gratitude,
Yeah.
and just sort of you must feel safe and peaceful in your garden as
Yeah,
well,
I
so there's
do.
that sense as well.
Yeah, definitely. And just to go off on a slight tangent for a couple of minutes, that sort of leads me on to something else that I was going to talk about, and then we'll come back to the grounding. But it's weird how some people can just feel more of a connection when they're, say, in the mountains, or when they're by the water, or when they're near trees. So why is that, do you think?
Because the more you interact with nature, the more it brings back your own natural intuition. Whereas if people are isolated from nature and just receive signals and biofields from electronics, it's going to dampen down their natural intuition and connection with nature, because we just get humans just get used to things as well. And also there are some people that are just naturally more of a water person, say on a sort of
Mm,
spiritual level, or there's an
mm,
earth people or fire people, or air people, and some people are just everything, and some people are spirit as well. So the
Yes.
only way to really embrace that would be outside. And some people are just naturally more intuitive, more psychic, more connected to consciousnesses greater than our own. So of course they're going to tap into it better, whereas anybody can learn. It's just some people have been so isolated from nature that
Mm,
everything's dysregulated, their appetite's dysregulated, their hormones are dysregulated, because it's not
mm,
just not just the Earth and the Moon. We've got to think about all the other planets as well, which each exert an influence on us. And by going
mm,
outside and connecting with all of it, it's going to help our own natural rhythms at a very sort of subtle level regulate again. And then in the body, when there's less chaos going on a sort of quantum
mm,
level,
mm,
and
mm,
things are quieter, signals can go travel through the body better. So that will be information. But then also there's more to us than just our body. You know, the mind doesn't exist inside the skull. So
mm, mm.
we've removed some of this noise, and now we're back in nature, which everything's coherent or in sync. So of course we're going to feel a connection with all the other conscious things
Mm,
outside.
mm, mm. Yeah, and it's funny because I find when I'm around trees, I find I don't know, it kind of lifts my whole spirit. I can't even explain it. I can't put it into words, but there's a feeling that I get when I'm near to trees, and I just feel like don't know, as I say, just my spirit seems lifted. So yeah.
Oh, I'm completely the same. It's like there's a wood really close to me, and it's always sometimes even if, like, back to your question about is it sunny, it's like, well, it doesn't matter if it is, because if
Mm,
people can get in with the trees, like the forest bathing, there's a
yes.
whole other
Yes.
benefits there, because also with tree roots, electricians tend not to run electrical wires in tree roots, so it's a better place for grounding because you haven't got underground electrics. And there's also
Mm,
trees communicate with one another as well,
mm,
and it's just an environment where a lot of people find great joy and safety and
yes.
pleasure. And sometimes if people are very disconnected from it, they've forgotten what it's like to be with the trees. But
Mm.
it's definitely, if someone's stressed or something, it's much better to go in with the trees than it is to sort of do other things, because
Yeah,
the natural way to just calm you back down again.
definitely. And I find, I don't know if you find this, but I find when I'm in the forest or I'm walking amongst trees, there's like a different sound.
Mm.
My ears, I don't know, hear things differently, and I just hear those lovely sounds, which automatically makes me feel more relaxed.
Well, there's a lot to sound because we haven't even touched on it, but most people will agree that car alarms and hedge
Mm.
cutters and screaming children is a really and barking dogs
Yes.
is very jarring to the
Yeah.
nervous system. Whereas if we go out and just hear rivers and birds tweeting and
Mm,
rustling and stuff like that, these are very, very calming noises. And we don't
mm,
have any ear lids, so everything goes into our ear. We can't block the sound, and nasty sounds raise cortisol as well.
mm,
And we can't do
mm,
anything about it unless we want to wear
mm.
earmuffs or
No.
earplugs. So there's definitely a lot to be said about, there's all sorts of lovely noises like singing bowls and tuning forks and all of these
Mm,
resonance and like different frequencies that are very healing and helpful. And there will definitely be an amount of sort of healing sounds and noises. And also the noises in the forest are not tend to be loud or
mm,
high pitched or anything like that. So it's sort of
no.
nice, calm
Yeah, it
sounds.
is. It is. Yeah. So I think just get it. I mean, I know Monty Don, the gardener. He's a sort of national treasure, really, isn't he? And he went on. He used to go on and on about, how gardening is so good for mental health and everything. And I don't think maybe a lot of people didn't really take that much notice of him. I mean, I don't know, but I just think that there is so much. Once I've started looking into all of this, and you realize that we just don't spend enough time out in nature, enough time out in our garden, if or just some pot plants, for instance, and what that can do to our mental health and our physical health as well.
Well, I think it's vital. It really, I lose patience every day over people just wanting to take medication or supplements for
Mm,
mental health, especially
mm,
children and young people, where just
mm,
start at the absolute basics of go outside more. And it does, I do sound like a broken record, but just find something fun to do outside, or make
Mm.
something, or get plants, or even with gardening, everybody has to learn somehow. And there are always groups that'll teach you, or even some
Yeah.
knowledgeable garden centers will tell you what to grow. And even if you
Mm.
attempt and it doesn't work, the act of attempting to garden, and even if people just sit in it,
Okay.
it's kind of a sort of no-brainer, and it's free as well. And
Yes.
I think it's really important for children because they're spending more and more time inside with the electronic babysitters. And
Mm.
then there's an explosion in mental health problems and anxiety and ADHD
Absolutely.
and all these medications being given to people really young. And we don't really understand
Mm.
what the medications will do. And I just think a lot of them are just unnecessary. And then letting children sleep with televisions and iPads and stuff in their
Mm.
beds, and not, making it dark enough in the evening and blocking the blue light. I just think it's, we have to just get back to the correct signals from nature in order to heal, because like I said, it's
Yes.
free, and you can't possibly hurt yourself with blue blocking glasses
Mm.
or
Mm.
incandescent bulbs or just playing in the garden. So,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
something that's it's really obvious, and I think people
Yeah.
overlook it, but then simple things are what move needles. Like common
Yeah.
sense goes a long way.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yes. No, brilliant. Thank you. So, just going back to the grounding then. So, if somebody wanted to start grounding, so they can just go outside, and is there a minimum amount of time that they would need to be on the grass for?
It's all back to how much do they want it, because you
Mm.
can buy grounding shoes with leather soles and copper rivets. So every time you walk, you're grounded. But I think in one of the studies, it was 10 minutes to
All
get a
right.
benefit. But it's like
Mm.
everything. If people are going to go out for 2 minutes and say, oh, this is rubbish, it didn't work,
Yeah.
then the whole equation is then okay, that they're grounded for 2 minutes, so that they're not grounded for 23 hours and 58 minutes.
Mm.
So of course it's all back to the more the better, and people just build up to it over time. So if somebody's never grounded, just going outside and standing on the bare earth after, say, using their phone or their computer and going, is a brilliant start. So
Yeah.
everyone has to start somewhere, but there's no
Yeah.
such thing as a minimum of, you have to, nowadays, as I was saying before, the environment gets more and more unfriendly. So we have to put more and more effort into doing things to benefit our health. And it's like, well, what would you be doing instead? If someone was just watching TV instead of grounding, then they have to make the decision themselves to improve their health. And there isn't a minimum prescription. The sicker somebody is, the more they need to
The
do.
more that they need to do it. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And for those people who haven't got a garden, who haven't got grass, say if they go out and all they've got is a patio,
Yeah, you can
what can
ground
they
through
do?
concrete, yes.
Oh, right. Okay.
Concrete conducts, asphalt doesn't. Or luckily in the UK, there tends to be a lot of greenery in parks and things. So it's about
Mm.
taking the time to walk to a park, or, even in the city where I live in Leeds, there are plenty, there's even a lake here. So there's plenty of places for people to go to if they want to make the effort.
Yes, yes. And also if you've maybe got a patio or haven't got a patio, but you've got plants that you grow in pots, so you can touch the plants and
Yeah,
that's also
I
grounding.
think the clay pot might be insulating, but clay pots are not very common. Lots of them are plastic now, so
Mm.
that's going to be an insulator. So those plants aren't grounded. It's one's actually
Ah,
flower bed, because the plastic is an
right.
insulator.
Okay, okay, right. So, but if some, so right, so if somebody's got a flower bed, but they haven't got any grass,
Yeah, they
they
can.
can they
Yes,
can hold the flowers and touch the flowers, and that will give them a sense that the grounding as well.
yes, yes, yes,
Okay,
definitely.
brilliant. Okay, that's really good. Thank you. Really, really useful. So, can we go on now and talk about deuterium? Because I keep hearing this word and I'm not really sure what
Oh,
it
yes.
is.
This is like kind of a massive topic that would
Oh,
take
right.
a whole
Okay.
podcast. Yeah.
Okay, well, could you just touch on it maybe and just explain maybe the very general outline as to what it
Oh,
is?
okay. So deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen, and hydrogen's vital for everything in life. So the sun pushes out hydrogen all day long. It's vital for all our biochemical reactions in our bodies.
Mm.
And hydrogen is like abundant in like everything, like it's in food, and it's sort of a key part of biology. It's a sort of key energy molecule. And then with deuterium, it's an isotope. So it's got a neutron as well. So it's twice the size and it's got a different magnetic moment and it's got different properties. So it looks like a hydrogen, but it's not quite the same. And it has a symbol D for deuterium. And it's about, I think, 0.002% of the hydrogens are deuterium. So it's around in the earth and it increases over centuries and stuff because the sun is what produces hydrogen and obviously it produces deuterium as well. So the amount goes up because the universe is always kind of expanding and making stuff and matter. So the problem with deuterium is because it's bigger and different to hydrogen, if it gets into the mitochondria, it's there's a thing called the ATPase and it makes
Mm.
ATP and hydrogen or a proton, a H plus, is supposed to go down the hole in this spinning machine in the mitochondria. And that'll go through fine and everything works perfectly. If a deuterium goes in, it's too big. And there's sort of evidence that it damages the mitochondria because it gets stuck.
Oh.
So it's going to cause mitochondrial problems. And like I said before, if you've got bad mitochondria, it's not just having low energy.
Mm.
It's going to open you up for things like 85% of sort of chronic disease. And it's also been shown that deuterium causes cancer, diabetes. It
Right.
contributes to autoimmune
Mm.
disorders.
Mm.
So it's all about, there's deuterium in the environment anyway, and the body does use it. It's just when the deuterium gets in the wrong place, then say,
Right,
then
right.
say, for example, we've been talking about vitamin D and sex
Mm.
hormones. If there's a deuterium instead of a hydrogen somewhere, sometimes the body doesn't recognize it because it's not what it was expecting. So then
Right.
the signal from that hormone doesn't get through, or deuterium is kind of, it binds, it makes molecules more stable. So if
Mm.
people have got deuterated cholesterol, sometimes the vitamin D pathway is harder to make because the ultraviolet light to open the cholesterol,
Mm.
it needs more energy, and the deuterium's there making the molecule more stable.
Oh
So
gosh.
yeah,
Mm.
and it can, and also in terms of our water battery, because
Mm.
deuterium's twice the size, or it's double the mass, it provides sort of half the energy. So it's basically a burden on the body. It's an energy stealer on multiple
Mm.
levels.
Mm. Mm.
And in terms of food, because a glucose is a hydrated hydrocarbon, it brings in more deuterium than, say, a fat, which is just a hydrocarbon because
Right.
of the way the bonding is. So fat is low
Mm.
deuterium, and then glucose is high
Okay.
deuterium. But then things like seed oils are even high, like crazily high, like over 200. And then collagen
Right.
supplements are going to have lots of deuterium in them. So are
Mm.
supplements that get made in factories because they're not careful with the way in which they
Okay.
treat hydrogen. So it's just all about not being
Mm.
frightened of deuterium, but just to be aware that eating lots of processed food and taking lots of unnecessary supplements is a really good way
Right.
to
Yeah.
overload yourself with
Mm.
deuterium.
So somebody who was more on a ketogenic way of eating would be better off, basically, then, wouldn't
Yes,
they?
yes.
As long as they didn't have the seed oils and
Yes, or the keto
um,
snacks, or the
yeah,
collagen powder, or or all the
yeah,
supplements that are not
yes,
necessary.
yes.
Because
Okay.
also the other important part about deuterium is we naturally deplete it all the time if we sleep properly and if we've got a
Mm.
good circadian rhythm. Because
Ah,
if all our body's in
right.
rhythm, it'll
Okay.
deplete it. And
Right.
also if we don't sit in blue light all the time, because that
Mm.
encourages deuterium to stay in the body and red light encourages it
Okay.
to leave. So and also things like sweating or saunas,
Mm.
that can help deuterium depletion because obviously it's going to come
Ah,
out as the
that's
water.
interesting.
And then there's
Right.
deuterium depleted water that people can use as well. And that's been used for
Mm.
cancer. It's a licensed treatment in Europe for animal cancers.
Ah.
Um, but then back to sort of sunlight and glucose and
Mm.
fruit in summer, when there's a lot more UV light and solar yield, the body's better at handling deuterium. So that's why not to be frightened of eating seasonal and local produce in the summer when it's
Right.
supposed to be there, because the
Mm.
environment is geared to help you to deplete your deuterium
Right.
as well. And
Yeah.
yes,
Okay. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So really just beginning to wind this up now, wrap it up now, sorry. Just beginning to wrap this up now. So if people want to take back control of their health. And we've talked a lot today about a number of aspects of staying healthy. What are the first three things that you think people could do if they were just wanting to step for the first time into this sort of quantum world? What are the three things that they could do just to start off with to ease them gently into it?
Okay, so I'd choose water, light, and magnetism. So with light, that would be improving their circadian rhythm. So we've gone over it, seeing the
Yeah.
sunrise, seeing the UV, blocking blue light with blue blockers
Mm,
if they work on a screen all day, and then, if possible, seeing the sunset, get enough vitamin D, and then
mm,
block blue light after sunset. And
yeah.
just remember that with humans and eating, we're meant to eat in daylight, not when it's dark. So just very
Right.
simply, daytime is when you set your body clock, and the more you can get access to the sun and the more consistent you are with this, the better your body clock. Then with water, it would be, I'd just say, a basic of distill your water and remineralize it and structure it. And bring the water back to its own natural sort of living state. I know we didn't
Mm,
touch on this too much.
no.
Just distilling water is just vital, and then remineralizing it and structuring it. And also, on the subject of water, remembering that your mitochondria make water, and
Mm,
they'll make it better the more sunlight you get. So it's not just about
right.
the water you drink, it's about the
Yeah.
water you make and the water you protect in your body.
Mm,
And then for
mm,
magnetism, it would just be consider take on board grounding, but also limit your tech use. So don't unnecessarily go on your phone, because it's the biggest EMF bomb of all of the devices. And then maybe
mm,
unplug devices that you don't need, and make your bedroom tech free so that you've got a good electromagnetic
brilliant.
environment to sleep in. And
Mm,
none of this has to be all done at once, and everything's a work in progress.
yeah.
And I always say to people, if you don't want to do it, then what's the alternative? And most of it's free anyway.
Exactly, exactly. Yes. No, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, thank you.
Um, and I just feel like, we've covered a lot, but I've got a lot more that I want to ask you. So maybe you'd come back on again and
Oh, yes, of course.
talk
Yes.
some more about other things, because there were sort of like free radicals, a bit more about the deuterium that I want to talk about, and other bits and pieces. Oh, fourth phase of water, that's something that I want to talk about, the whole Gerald Pollock thing. So brilliant. That's great. So where can people find you?
Oh, I've like you kindly said, I go by Busy Superhuman online, and I've got a YouTube channel, Instagram, TikTok, Substack, for people that like to read things.
Mm, mm,
And then people can contact me if they wanted to work with me personally. And I've got a variety of sort of little courses, and I've got a membership group where people can join, and it's sort of a group where we have sort of weekly Zooms, and people ask questions and bring me things to look at. So there's lots
brilliant.
of free things, plenty of free things for people to learn, and then if other things, if they want to take things to the next level.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel like I've learned so much from today, and I'm sure a lot of people will just be able to take so much from this. And for people who have not really done this type of lifestyle before, today has just been such a good first step into this whole new lifestyle. So thank you so much for that.
Oh,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much, Deborah, for having me on. Thank
Okay,
you.
brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Right, so I'll edit this out now after this.
Okay.
So now I've so enjoyed today, seriously, because I just had so many questions, just wasn't sure about things, I mean, um, just but because I first got into all of this maybe a couple of years ago. I came across Jack Cruz, and of course, I think the way he explains it, he just knows so much, doesn't he? And he's sort of like, I was thinking, well, I'm not sure what he's saying. It's, he's speaking words that I recognize, but I'm not sure how to put it all together and get it into context in like modern life, really. And then from there, I came across Dr. Tom Cowan,
Oh,
and then
yes, I
I've
trained
then
with Tom.
oh, did you? Yeah. So
He's been on my podcast as well.
yes, yes. I mean, you've had some such interesting people, on your podcast, and then I came across you, and I came across Dr. Stephen Hussey as well.
Oh,
So
Stephen Hussey's wonderful. Yes.
yeah, he's great. So I had him on my YouTube channel a couple of weeks ago. So I'm just really getting into to all of this now, and it's beginning to kind of sink it. And then I think getting outside and actually doing it as well helps as well
Oh yeah, it's
to
like
understand
everything.
it all.
Because do you work with clients?
Well, I do. So I'm a health coach, but I haven't really got into coaching on this side of things yet. So I'm still, health coaching, like keto coaching, all of this sort of thing.
Because that's the whole thing. It's people know more than me, but they don't do it. So it's
Yeah.
all fundamentally, and I've got less tolerant over the years about it. It's like, well, you have to do it or you're going
Yeah.
to be ill. And I'm not as patient anymore now. And some people
Mm,
need that because I had the
yeah.
same with keto and people making excuses and not measuring
Mm,
anything and complaining
no.
about it all and getting, oh no, I just read in the Daily Mail that keto diet, it's like, oh, for goodness sake, just okay,
Yeah.
just don't do it then, just
Yeah,
go.
exactly,
And
exactly.
it's like, whereas with the
No.
quantum stuff, like obviously I'm really eager to teach people and help them because a lot of the time people just
Mm,
don't know. And I don't mind how stupid a question is ever. It's when people
mm,
won't do it. That's what really
mm,
annoys me.
mm,
Whereas
mm.
it doesn't matter if I have to explain the fourth phase of water 50 times to somebody that's
No,
70. If they're going to actually do something about
no.
it, then I'm
Mm,
really happy. And a lot of
yeah.
people actually don't need a very big explanation. They just need to understand, why they're doing it and
Mm,
how it helps them. And they're always the good clients. And then you get
yeah.
people that just ask non-stop questions and never do anything. So I think it's
No, no,
about spreading
exactly.
information. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have got a bit of a toe in there with clients, and I have started saying to them, get outside more. I tend to kind of combine it with the walking. So I'm saying to them, right,
Oh, yeah, the walking. I'm
you
big
know,
on that.
get outside, do some walking, and I'll be saying to them, every time the sun is out, get outside, spend some time, in your garden, around your plants. And so I'm trying to kind of introduce it that way,
Oh yeah, you have
to
to
people,
kind
really.
of I think it's easier for me because like I with the food, like it's interesting, but I never completely bought it.
Mm,
So I
mm,
sort of was like, I know how to do all of, and I've like honed it in a lot over the years of like really dialing in for different countries. But I was much more at it from the light and the physics from the
yeah,
get-go. So people
yeah.
weren't, they knew what they were coming for. Whereas if a
Mm,
coach say if someone starts off as a Pilates teacher and then wants to do massage, the people like, do you actually know what I'll go,
yeah.
and it's sometimes it's like they just want more food information from you.
Yeah.
But over time, the
Mm,
transition happens that people just accept that you're going to tell them to. And I'm massive on walking. I think that's
mm.
just such a, important
It
thing.
is, it is. And as you've touched on there, really, I mean, I've done keto, I've been keto for about 13 years now, but definitely I've always felt that there has been something missing, but I've never been able to work out what it is. And now when I'm learning about all of this, it just seems so right. It just all seems to fit into place. I can't explain it really. It just feels right.
Oh yeah, you kind of have a gnosis. Like sometimes I
Yes.
understand something, but I can't explain it to other people.
Yes,
But I
yes,
understand. It's like I know, oh, I'm doing the right thing now. Whereas
yeah.
sometimes I know I'm doing something wrong, but I don't know
Mm,
what. And then I'll have
mm,
I'll learn something or discover something and think, oh yes, it was that. And
yeah, yeah.
it just
Yeah, and I thought for a while, oh, it's because I'm not eating sufficient meat. So I went carnivore
oh
for
yeah.
like, well over 12 months, but that wasn't the answer for me. I thought that was going to be the answer, and it just wasn't the answer for me at
Oh yeah,
all.
that drives me crazy because I always ask for labs and HTMA tests way before that because people are like, oh yeah, I just need to like do a keto diet that's an 80/20 or I'm just going to
Yeah,
eat meat and salt. It's like, well,
yeah,
get me some labs and I'll just tell you now, if
yeah,
you did that, everything's going to get worse. But I'm not
yeah.
against that at all. I'm all about everything has to be matched with the light and you have to have
Mm,
lab tests. Otherwise, how do you know anything? And
yeah,
that's where
yeah,
and also I do think that with ways of eating, people are not going to hurt themselves doing something for like 2 months. It's when people get more and more strict and then they tell me, oh, I've got histamine issues and
yeah,
I can't eat this and now I'm only eating chicken
yeah, yeah.
and I think, oh,
Yeah,
this
and
is
it's weird now how there is this whole cohort of postmenopausal women when you go onto the carnivore forums who cannot lose weight.
oh, because they're
They
oh, they're leptin resistant,
yes,
or they're
they
just eating
can't
too
lose
much,
weight.
or they're just eating too much fat because
They,
eating lots of fat in summer is not the right, and
mm,
it's a winter activity, and people don't
yeah.
understand that everything you don't just do the same thing all
Mm,
the time. You follow nature. But yeah, there's all sorts of things. I
exactly.
could go on
Yeah.
for ages about.
Yeah. Sorry.
I
Yeah.
mean, but no, no,
No.
I don't mind. I think it's like I'm kind of patient with people about it. I never go
Yeah.
into forums anymore because it's just full of
Mm,
just stupid things. And
yeah.
I don't, I kind of don't care anymore. I don't care about being right or wrong anymore. And that's a big
Mm,
thing, that there's lots of sort of cultish behavior around food. And nobody knows everything. I don't,
no.
Jack doesn't, I do stuff wrong
No.
all the time and miss things or say something wrong in a podcast. And it's like, it's all a work in progress. And I used
Mm,
to think, oh, if I'd have known all this 5 years ago, I could have helped
yeah.
so many people. But
Mm,
then that just wasn't right for the universe. And I think doing it wrong and being
yeah.
wrong is a really good teacher, because then you learn how to bail from something. Because we
You
always have to
do.
explore new things, otherwise we never learn anything. But
No.
sometimes a rabbit hole is really terrible, and
Yeah.
you have to
Yeah.
bail and think, okay, I went down the wrong one. But yeah,
Definitely. Oh my goodness. Do you know what? I could speak to you for hours. I
oh
could
yes,
really speak
likewise.
to you for
Oh,
absolutely hours. So, but thank you so much
a
for
pleasure.
today.
It's been
This has been
fun.
fantastic. And I will get you back on again because
Oh,
there's
I'd love
lots
that.
more that I want to talk about and questions that I've got to ask. But